I stood in the marble lobby of the courthouse holding both my children's hands, and I could feel everyone staring at us. My daughter Emma squeezed my left hand so tight it hurt. My son Noah pressed against my right side like he wanted to disappear into my coat. We didn't belong here, not in this gleaming palace of mahogany and gold where people wore $1,000 suits and spoke in voices that commanded empires. But Richard had made sure we'd come. Even in death, he was still controlling my life, still finding ways to humiliate me one last time. The woman standing across the lobby didn't even try to hide her smile. Vanessa, 26 years old, legs that went on forever, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than I used to make in 6 months when I was still allowed to work. She tilted her head and whispered something to the man beside her, Richard's attorney, Marcus Hale, and they both looked at me and laughed. Not even a quiet laugh. A full, cruel laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. My twins heard it. I felt Noah flinch. "Mommy, why is that lady laughing at us?" Emma whispered. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break her heart even more, so I just stroked her hair and said nothing. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors and called us inside. This was it. The reading of Richard Calloway's will. The final act of a marriage that had ended 2 years ago when he walked out of our tiny apartment, looked at our 3-month-old twins sleeping in their cribs, and said the words I still heard in my nightmares. "I can't do this anymore, Julia. I wasn't meant for this life." He'd met Vanessa 3 weeks later. Or maybe he'd known her before. I never got the truth about that. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but twice as intimidating. Dark wood panels climbed the walls. The judge's bench loomed like a throne. I guided the twins to the front row on the left side, the side for family. Vanessa glided to the right side with Marcus, her heels clicking like tiny victories against the floor. She sat down, crossed her legs, and pulled out her phone like this was just another appointment on her calendar. Judge Raymond Stoker entered from a side door, an older man with silver hair and deep-set eyes that had seen every kind of lie a person could tell. Everyone stood. He gestured for us to sit, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at the papers in front of him. "We're here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Richard James Calloway, deceased as of October 14th. His voice was steady and formal, giving nothing away. Present are the relevant parties named in the will: Mrs. Julia Calloway, former spouse; Miss Vanessa Reeves, current partner of the deceased; and legal representation for the estate, Mr. Marcus Hale." Marcus stood, all confidence and polished charm. He'd been Richard's lawyer for 7 years, the man who'd drafted our divorce papers, the man who'd made sure I walked away with almost nothing because I'd been too broken to fight. "Your Honor, if I may," Marcus said smoothly, "I'd like to expedite these proceedings. The terms of Mr. Calloway's will are quite clear, and I believe we can conclude this matter quickly and allow everyone to move forward." Judge Stoker looked at him over his glasses. "I'll determine how quickly we proceed, Mr. Hale. Sit down." Marcus blinked, surprised, but he sat. Vanessa glanced at him, her smile faltering just slightly. I felt the tiniest flutter of something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Dangerous, painful hope. The judge opened the file. The estate of Richard Calloway consists of assets totaling approximately $42 million. This includes property holdings, investment portfolios, business interests, and liquid assets. He paused, scanning the document. Mr. Calloway updated this will 6 weeks before his death. His previous will, drafted 4 years ago, left the entirety of his estate to his then-wife, Julia Marie Calloway. My breath caught. 4 years ago, before the twins, before Vanessa, before everything fell apart. Vanessa leaned forward, her smile returning, sharper now. She thought she knew what came next. Judge Stoker continued. The updated will, however, made significant changes. He looked up at me, and I couldn't read his expression. It names Ms. Vanessa Reeves as the primary beneficiary of $20 million in liquid assets and the penthouse property at Harborview Towers. Vanessa actually gasped with delight. She grabbed Marcus's arm and squeezed it. "Oh my God," she breathed, not even trying to keep her voice down. "$20 million?" Emma started to cry softly beside me. Noah just stared at his shoes. I wanted to take them and leave, to run from this room where even Richard's ghost could still hurt us, but something kept me frozen in my seat. The way Judge Stoker was watching Vanessa, the way his mouth had tightened just slightly. "Ms. Reeves," the judge said quietly, "I'd advise you to wait until I've finished." Her smile didn't fade. She was too high on victory to hear the warning in his voice. Judge Stoker turned a page. The will also contains specific bequests to Julia Calloway and her children, Emma Rose Calloway and Noah James Calloway. He paused, and the silence stretched so long I could hear my own heartbeat. Mrs. Calloway is to receive the remainder of the estate's assets, totaling approximately $22 million, as well as all business interests in Calloway Enterprises, the family home in Rosewood Hills, and the vacation property in Vermont. The words didn't make sense at first. They bounced off my brain like stones off water. 22 million. Business interests, the family home. Vanessa shot to her feet. "What? No, that's not—" "Marcus, what is he talking about?" Marcus had gone pale. He was flipping through his own copy of the will, his hands shaking slightly. "Your Honor, there must be some mistake. The assets were to be divided differently. Ms. Reeves was to receive the majority." "Sit down, Mr. Hale," Judge Stoker said, and this time there was steel in his voice. "There's more." Vanessa was breathing hard now, her face flushed. "This is insane. Richard promised me everything. He told me I'd be taken care of. He loved me." "Ms. Reeves, you will remain silent, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Judge Stoker's voice could have cut glass. She fell back into her chair, but her hands were clenched into fists. The judge looked down at the document again. In addition to the financial bequests, Mr. Calloway left a letter to be read aloud in the presence of all parties. He reached for a sealed envelope, opened it carefully, and pulled out a single page. This letter is dated 6 weeks before his death, the same day the will was updated. My heart was hammering now. 6 weeks before he died. Richard had been sick for 3 months before the cancer finally took him. 6 weeks before the end. He'd been in the hospital, weak and barely able to speak. I'd brought the twins to see him once, at his mother's insistence. He'd looked at them like he was seeing them for the first time, really seeing them, and tears had run down his face. But he hadn't said anything to me, not a word. Judge Stoker began to read. "To whoever is present at the reading of my will, I need you to understand that I have been a coward and a fool." His voice was steady, but the words themselves felt like they were burning. 2 years ago, I walked away from the only woman who ever truly loved me. Julia gave me everything, She supported me when I was building my business from nothing. She worked 2 jobs so I could take risks. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And when we finally had the children we dreamed of for years, when she gave birth to our twins, I looked at my life and I panicked. Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. Marcus put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. I was 43 years old, Judge Stoker continued reading, and I felt like my youth was over. I felt trapped by responsibility. So I did the most selfish, cruel thing a man can do. I abandoned my family. I found a younger woman who made me feel like I was 25 again. Vanessa was beautiful and exciting, and she never asked me for anything except money, which was easy to give. She never asked me to be better. She never challenged me. She never loved me, not really, but I was too drunk on my own ego to see it. "This is bullshit," Vanessa screamed. "He's lying. He loved me. We were going to get married. Ms. Reeves, final warning." Judge Stoker didn't even look up. He kept reading. I wish I could say I came to my senses on my own, but I didn't. It took cancer to wake me up. When the doctors told me I had 6 months to live, every lie I'd been telling myself fell apart. I thought about who I wanted beside me at the end. I thought about who I wanted to raise my children. I thought about who had actually loved me versus who had loved what I could buy for them. Vanessa's face had gone from red to white. She was shaking. "I called Julia 3 months ago," the judge read. "I asked if I could see the twins. She had every right to tell me to go to hell, but she didn't. She brought them to the hospital, Emma and Noah, 3 years old. They didn't even know who I was. Emma asked Julia if I was her grandpa. That broke something in me that couldn't be fixed. I felt tears streaming down my face. I remembered that day. Emma had been scared of the hospital, all the machines and tubes. Noah had brought Richard a drawing of a dinosaur. Richard had held that drawing and sobbed. I wanted to tell Julia everything that day, Judge Stoker continued. I wanted to apologize and beg for forgiveness and try to make things right. But I was too weak and too ashamed. So I did the only thing I could do. I called Marcus and told him to change my will. Everything goes to Julia and the twins. Everything that matters, anyway. Judge Stoker paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. I left Vanessa $20 million because I'm not a complete monster, and she did spend 2 years with me. But I want her to understand that she never had my heart. That belonged to Julia from the day I met her until the day I die. I'm leaving Julia the business, the homes, the real wealth, because she built it with me, even if my name was the only one on the paperwork. And I'm leaving it to her, because I know she'll use it to give our children the life they deserve. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even Vanessa had stopped making noise. She was just staring straight ahead, like she'd been turned to stone. Judge Stoker turned the page. There's one more paragraph. Julia, if you're hearing this, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm sorry for abandoning you when you needed me most. I'm sorry for making you raise our children alone. You deserved so much better than me. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I'll understand if you can't. Please tell Emma and Noah that their father loved them, even though he was too stupid to show it. Tell them to be better than I was. And please, please take care of yourself. You gave me everything, and I gave you nothing but heartache. Now I'm trying to give you the security and comfort you should have had all along. I love you. I never stopped. Richard. Judge Stoker set the letter down carefully. He looked at Vanessa, who was staring at him with wild, desperate eyes. Ms. Reeves, the $20 million left to you comes with one condition outlined in a separate clause. You are to have no further contact with the Calloway family. No calls, no visits, no social media interaction. If you violate this condition, the $20 million reverts to the Children's Trust Fund. Do you understand? Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Finally, she managed to whisper, "This can't be legal. He was coerced. He was dying. He wasn't thinking clearly." Mr. Calloway was fully competent when this will was drafted, Judge Stoker said firmly. I have statements from 3 physicians confirming his mental state. I have video documentation of the signing, and I have my own notes from a conversation I had with Mr. Calloway at his request 2 weeks before his death, where he explained his reasoning to me personally. Marcus started to stand. Your Honor, we'll be filing a challenge to... You can file anything you like, Mr. Hale, but you won't win. I suggest you advise your client to accept the very generous bequest she's received and move on with her life. Judge Stoker closed the file. This court finds the will of Richard James Calloway to be valid and properly executed. Distribution of assets will proceed as outlined. Mrs. Calloway, you'll need to meet with the estate attorneys within 30 days to finalize the transfer of business interests and property titles. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his weathered face was almost kind. Mrs. Calloway, I knew your husband professionally for many years. I'd like to think that in his final weeks, he found a measure of redemption. I hope this provides some measure of justice for you and your children. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face, holding my twins close. Judge Stoker stood. This hearing is concluded. Marcus pulled Vanessa out of the courtroom before she could cause more of a scene. I heard her screaming in the hallway, her voice echoing off the marble. 20 million? That's it. After everything I gave him? After 2 years of my life? She gets everything else? That fat, pathetic, ugly. The door swung shut, cutting off her words. Emma looked up at me with wide eyes. Mommy, what happened? Why was that lady so angry? I wiped my face and managed a shaky smile. Because, baby, and sometimes people think they've won something when really they've lost everything that matters. Noah tugged on my sleeve. Are we rich now? The question was so innocent and so perfectly timed that I actually laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. Yeah, baby, I guess we are. An older woman approached me as I was gathering our things. She had kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Mrs. Calloway? I'm Patricia Wells. I was Richard's estate attorney before Marcus took over. He contacted me 6 weeks ago and asked me to oversee this will personally. He wanted to make sure it was done right. I looked at her, still trying to process everything. Why didn't Marcus know? He was Richard's lawyer. Patricia's mouth tightened. Because Richard suspected Marcus would try to talk him out of it, or find a way to undermine the will. So he had me draft it separately, and only informed Marcus after it was filed with the court. Marcus was furious, but there was nothing he could do. Richard really planned all this? Every detail. She handed me her card. He wanted you protected. He wanted the children provided for. And he wanted Vanessa to understand exactly what she'd been to him. A distraction, nothing more. I took the card with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just take care of those beautiful babies. She smiled at the twins. Richard talked about them constantly those last few weeks. He was so proud of them, so full of regret. I think putting this will together gave him some peace at the end. She left me standing there in the courtroom, trying to make sense of a world that had just turned completely upside down. 2 hours ago, I'd been Julia Calloway, single mother, working overnight shifts as a nurse to keep our one-bedroom apartment, wondering if I'd ever be able to afford dance classes for Emma or baseball camp for Noah. Now I was Julia Calloway, heir to a $42 million fortune, owner of a business empire, mother to 2 children who would never have to worry about money again. But the money wasn't what made me cry. As I walked out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, it was the letter. It was knowing that Richard had finally seen the truth, even if it came too late. It was knowing that in his last days he'd thought about me and the twins and tried, in his own broken way, to make things right. 3 months later, I stood in the office that used to be Richard's, high above the city in the Calloway Enterprises building, while floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a landscape of glass and steel. Emma and Noah were in the conference room next door with their new nanny, a wonderful woman named Rose, who the twins adored. I could hear them laughing, playing some game with building blocks. My new assistant, Derek, knocked on the doorframe. "Mrs. Calloway, the financial advisors are here for your 4 o'clock meeting." "Thank you, Derek. Give me 5 minutes." He nodded and disappeared. I turned back to the window and let myself have one moment of stillness, of reflection. The last 3 months had been a whirlwind. Meetings with lawyers and accountants and business managers, learning about investments and portfolios and corporate structure, discovering that I was now the majority shareholder in a company that did $70 million in annual revenue. It was terrifying and overwhelming, and some days I wanted to run away from all of it. But then I'd see my twins playing in the backyard of our new home, the house in Rosewood Hills, where Richard and I had planned to grow old together. I'd watch Emma twirl in her dance costume, or Noah swing his little baseball bat, and I'd remember why I was doing this. Not for revenge, not even for justice, really. For them. To give them everything Richard and I had dreamed of giving them before he lost his way. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it instead. "I hope you're happy. You won. You got everything. But you'll never be what I was to him. You'll never be young and beautiful and exciting. You'll always just be the boring wife he ran away from. Vanessa." I should have known she couldn't let it go. I looked at the message for a long moment. 6 months ago, words like that would have destroyed me. They would have confirmed every terrible thing I believed about myself after Richard left. That I wasn't enough. That I'd never been enough. That I deserved to be abandoned. But standing in this office, with my children laughing in the next room, with Richard's final letter tucked in my desk drawer, I felt nothing but pity for her. I typed back slowly. "You're right about one thing. I'll never be what you were to him. I was more. I was his partner, his best friend, the mother of his children, the woman he built a life with. You were 2 years of midlife crisis, and in the end, when it mattered, he remembered the difference. I hope $20 million keeps you warm at night." I hit send and then blocked the number. Some people don't deserve more of your energy than that. 6 months after the will reading, I was invited to speak at a women's business conference downtown. The topic was resilience and rebuilding after loss. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me, and talking about Richard, about the pain of the last few years, felt too raw and personal. But the organizer was persistent and kind, and eventually I agreed. The conference room was packed with women of all ages. I stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of faces, and my prepared speech flew completely out of my head. So I just told the truth. 2 years ago, my husband walked out on me and our infant twins. He left me with nothing. No money, no home, no support. Just debt and heartbreak, and 2 babies who needed me to be strong when I felt completely shattered. My voice shook, but I kept going. For 2 years, I worked myself to exhaustion. I took every extra shift I could get. I skipped meals so the twins could eat. I cried in the shower so they wouldn't see me fall apart. And I wondered every single day why I wasn't enough to make him stay. The room was silent. I could see women nodding, recognizing their own pain in my story. Then he died, and I found out that, at the end, he'd left everything to me and our children. Not because I deserved it, though I did, but because he finally understood what he'd thrown away. And you know what the strangest part was? I didn't feel victorious. I just felt sad. Sad that it took him dying to see the truth. Sad that my children would never really know their father. Sad that we'd lost so much time. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But here's what I learned. Betrayal doesn't define you. How people treat you doesn't determine your worth. I was always enough. I was always strong and capable and valuable. I just needed to believe it myself. And now, I run a multi-million-dollar company. I'm raising 2 incredible kids. I'm building a life that's mine, not defined by who left or who stayed or who finally saw my worth. It's defined by me. The applause started slowly and then built into something thunderous. Women stood. Some were crying. Afterward, dozens of them came up to tell me their own stories of betrayal and survival and finding strength they didn't know they had. One woman, probably in her 60s, took my hand and squeezed it. Thank you for being honest about the sadness. Everyone wants revenge stories where the betrayed woman feels nothing but triumph. But it's more complicated than that, isn't it? I nodded. So much more complicated. But you're doing it anyway. Living. Thriving. That's the real revenge. Maybe she was right. Maybe just continuing, just building a good life, despite everything, was the most powerful response to betrayal. Not because Richard could see it. He couldn't. Not anymore. But because I could. Because my children could. Because every woman in that room who'd ever been told she wasn't enough could see that survival was possible. That joy was possible. That the story didn't end with a betrayal. On the twins' 5th birthday, I took them to the cemetery for the first time since the funeral. We brought flowers, my bright yellow sunflowers that Emma had insisted on because they're happy flowers, Mommy. We stood in front of Richard's headstone, and I let them ask questions. Did Daddy love us? Noah asked, his small hand in mine. I knelt down between them, looking at their faces so serious and open. Yes, baby, he loved you very much. He made a lot of mistakes, really big ones, but loving you wasn't a mistake. That was the one thing he got right. Why did he leave us? Emma's voice was so small. How do you explain adult failures to children? How do you make sense of something that doesn't make sense? Sometimes people get scared and they make bad choices. Your daddy got scared of being a parent and a husband, and instead of being brave and working through it, he ran away. But at the end, he was sorry, so he wanted to make it better. Did he? Noah looked up at me with Richard's eyes. He tried. I think he tried as hard as he could in the time he had left. I put a hand on each of their shoulders. And you know what? We're going to be okay anyway. We're going to have a beautiful life. We're going to remember the good things about your daddy and forgive the bad things, and we're going to keep moving forward. Emma placed her sunflower on the grave very carefully. Noah did the same. We stood there for a moment in the warm spring sunshine, the three of us, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, not forget, but maybe acceptance, maybe peace. As we walked back to the car, Emma said, "Mommy, that lady from the courtroom, the angry one, is she okay?" I'd heard through Patricia that Vanessa had moved to California and burned through most of her $20 million in bad investments and expensive habits. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt tired. I don't know, honey. I hope she finds what she's looking for. What's she looking for? I thought about that for a long time before answering. The same thing everybody's looking for. Someone to love her. But I think maybe she's looking in all the wrong places. Noah tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, you said we could get ice cream after." I laughed. The moment of heavy reflection broken by 5-year-old priorities. "You're absolutely right. Ice cream it is." A year after Richard's death, I sold Callaway Enterprises. Not because I couldn't run it. I'd proven that I could. But because I didn't want to spend my life maintaining Richard's legacy. I wanted to build my own. I took the money from the sale and started a foundation that provided financial assistance and business mentoring to single mothers. I called it Second Chapter, because that's what we all deserved. A second chance, a new beginning, a story that didn't end with betrayal, but began with resilience. The twins are 7 now. Emma wants to be a veterinarian. Noah wants to be a professional baseball player or a dinosaur scientist, depending on the day. They're happy and healthy and completely unaware that their father's choices could have destroyed our lives. I made sure of that. I made sure. They grew up knowing they were loved and wanted. And enough, exactly as they were. And sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I take out Richard's letter and read it again. Not because I need to forgive him. I've done that work already, for my own peace more than his memory, but because it reminds me of something important. People are complicated. Betrayal is real and devastating. But so is regret, and so is love, and so is the possibility of redemption, even if it comes too late. I'll never know if Richard truly changed at the end, or if guilt and fear of death just made him sentimental. I'll never know if he really understood the damage he caused, or if he was just trying to ease his own conscience. But here's what I do know. I survived. My children thrived. And the life he walked away from became something more beautiful than anything he could have imagined. That's not revenge. So that's just truth. Last week, I was at the grocery store with the twins when I saw her. Vanessa. She looked older, harder around the edges. Designer bag, designer shoes, but something hollow in her eyes. She saw me too. For a second, We just stared at each other across the produce section. Emma was telling me some elaborate story about her friend's pet hamster. Noah was begging for the sugary cereal I never let him have. Vanessa's gaze moved from me to the twins, and something flickered across her face. Regret? Envy? I couldn't tell. Then she turned and walked away quickly, like she couldn't bear to look at us anymore. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then Noah wrapped his arms around my waist and said, "Mommy, you're the best mom in the whole world." And Emma nodded seriously in agreement, and I remembered something crucial. I didn't need Vanessa's regret, or Richard's posthumous apology, or anyone else's validation. I had already won. Not because I got the money, or the house, or the business, but because I got to be the one who stayed, the one who fought, the one who loved my children through the hardest season of our lives and came out the other side stronger. That's the story I'll tell them when they're older, and they ask harder questions about their father and his choices. I'll tell them that betrayal feels like the end, but it's actually just a chapter. A painful one, yes, one that leaves scars, but not the final word. Never the final word. We got in the car and drove home, to the house that's really ours now, filled with our memories and our laughter and our life. Emma sang along to some pop song on the radio. Noah was already half asleep in his car seat. He's clutching the toy dinosaur he takes everywhere. And I drove through the sunset-painted streets, thinking about how strange and hard and ultimately beautiful this journey has been. The woman who stood in that courtroom 2 years ago, broken and terrified, and certain she'd never be whole again, feels like a stranger to me now. Not because I've forgotten her pain, I haven't, but because I've grown so far beyond it. I've built something she couldn't have imagined. Not just wealth or security, but joy. Real, deep, hard-won joy. And if that's not the sweetest revenge, I don't know what is. So if you've read this far, if you've stayed with me through this whole messy, complicated story, I want to ask you something. What do you think? Did Richard deserve forgiveness? Did Vanessa get what she deserved? Or should she have gotten more? And if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing, how did you find your way back to joy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and sometimes they help me understand my own story a little better. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about people who survived impossible things and came out stronger, hit that subscribe button, because there are so many stories left to tell, and I'm just getting started. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, no matter what you've been through, your story isn't over. The best chapters might still be ahead of you. You just have to be brave enough to keep turning the pages.